the beauty of the film, I think, which was going to be one of my questions, and now that we're talking about it, Morgan Freeman's narration, like that literally carried the film, the pacing of it in such a beautiful way that I'm not saying that it wouldn't have worked had that not been there, but I truly feel that really carried the film in a very deep way.
Yeah. And it was a deliberate thing. A lot of times now films, they use that technique as a band-aid, but that was written into the script. That was not an afterthought. In actual fact, we recorded Morgan reading that, all the narration. Because I said to the producer, I really need it in the cutting room while I'm cutting.
Sure.
Because I've got to paste dialogue to pop in around the narration, around the dialogue. And so she said, well, what we do? I said, can you record it? Just get him to record it and we can, redo it. Well, I went to a radio station because they were on set in Mansfield, Ohio, which is this tiny little town, industrial town that was very depressed after all the industry had moved out.
Yeah.
But there wasn't much there. They went to the radio station and recorded it. And Morgan did it just in one go. And it was so good, without seeing a frame of picture, it was so good that we used it in the film while we were in production and doing screenings. When we came to actually do the physical mix of the movie and we're in a proper sound facility, we found out that there was a technical problem with it all. It had a very high pitch whine that you couldn't hear normally until you get into one of these studios.
Yeah.
And we couldn't get rid of it, couldn't filter it out. We tried all sorts of things. So we had to get Morgan to redo it. So we redid it to picture using his old one as a guide for him. And we were trying to match the performance, and we did it, but it took us 5 complete sessions with picking the best read of each one to get it to what it ended up being. But it took him 5 times. He had to come in 5 times and reread the whole thing. But it was used on the set a lot. They would play it on the set. And shots were timed to it. The one that's really springs to mind is on the tarring of the roof scene.
Yeah.
There's the great one at the end when it pans along all the men and it goes up to Morgan, and then it ends on Andy. That was all being played so they could move the camera and be at the right place at the right time. But all the others were just, the scene was cut, and the dialogue was fitted in between. So if I might have to put a longer pause in the dialogue than would be natural for a scene, so the dialogue wouldn't overlap the dialogue. The voiceover wouldn't overlap the dialogue.
Incredible.
That scene, particularly on the roof, was a combination of both those problems. It was there were 2 conversations going on. If you remember, there was a conversation going on with Andy and Hadley, the guard, about his money and his wife, and then there was a conversation going on with Red and the guys that had to intertwine, and I had to make sure that it felt logical enough to cut away from one conversation to another conversation and get back to the other conversation and not feel like we just held the scene still while the other part went on. It was a very, very tricky scene to do, but it worked.
And also I think, I mean, Morgan Freeman probably would have found another way to do what he does now, narration. I mean, that sort of, I think, was the first time, or one of the first time, he actually narrated. And now, I mean, he's done films.
Now he's Mr. Narration,
everywhere
very
now.
Much. I know.
I mean, that was a setting ground, basically.
It was. I don't think he'd done narration before that.
I don't think so either, because I think before that he had done Driving Miss Daisy.
That's right.
And Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and Glory. I think those were his 3 major films.
Yeah, so it's not like he was a household name by then either.
Yeah. No. working with Frank Darabont, what was that like? Like the first time you said, it was his first major film coming from TV. How did you guys work together and his creative process? What was that like compared to, let's say, other directors?
Oh, look, I really always have liked working with the writer director, because there's only one vision. I mean, it was easy. It was a dream. It was like you didn't have to try and please the writer and the director, because it was the same person. He was great to work with. I mean, he was very, he wasn't precious about any of his dialogue, because you got to remember all this dialogue, even though it's from a novella, it's all Frank's dialogue. None of this appears in the book. The book is actually the short story. If you read it, I mean, I didn't read it till after the film because I didn't want to be kind of poisoned or influenced by it.
Yeah.
It's like, this is nothing like the film, because it's set over a longer period. It's got more wardens in it, about 5, I think, whereas this one has 1. So Frank was great about dropping dialogue out that he thought was superfluous, and there was never any kind of argument. It was just an easy. He and I sitting down in those days, sitting down at a Steenbeck, which is a flat. I don't know if you know, that's a flatbed editing machine. And just working it day to day. And Frank was great because his writer, the way all writers work, or he did, he was a nighttime person and I was a daytime person. So he would come in late and leave early and give me time the next day to do the changes we talk about. Same thing happened on Green Mile. He'd do the same thing. It just was perfect because I didn't like working through the night. I'd do my changes in the morning, and then he'd come and look at them, and then we'd yes or no, or tweak that, and then we'd move on. So it was very easy. And what helped with both those scripts actually is they were just so well written. You didn't have problems like with a lot of films where scenes aren't working, and let's try moving this around to there and that around to there, or put it at the end of the film. The only real complication was the opening, as I've already talked about, which worked out brilliantly.
Right. And, with the Shawshank Redemption, one of the things that people always remember it with, among many other things, is, the conversation that happens in this semi-middle part of the film about hope, and in the finale, hope is not a good thing. It's the worst of things. Hope is a great thing. It's the best of things. And that ending, was that, in terms of the dialogue, was that always there in the script, in the way it was in the final film?
Yeah. I mean, before I came onto the project, the only thing is that the end of the film was a lot earlier. Was planned to be Hope, him driving away in the bus, and the bus is going away from camera, and I think the last words of his narration were, "Hope. I hope to see my friend. I hope. And that was the end. We always shot the end of the film where they meet on the beach, but it was much simplified. He walked up playing the harmonica, and because he never played the harmonica that he had in the cell.
Yeah.
He put it to his mouth and he never played it. So Frank had him play it, but it just seemed a bit hokey. So we dropped that part of the scene. They just walk up and see each other and hug, which was perfect. One of those things that by simplifying a scene made it better than it was. But the end of the film, the last bit of dialogue was always, or voiceover was always that, the hope. I hope to see my friend. I hope.
The ending, the way you just described, I'm so glad that we got to see the way it's done now. I do love that shot on the beach with the boat, the water, them coming
It was
together.
such a contrast. I mean, I had a big, the only time I was really very forceful about an opinion, I mean, you always give your opinion, but you try to do it diplomatically with it. Frank and producer Nikki Marvin were in the cutting room talking about ending the film where they originally wanted to end. They both said, yes, it should end with the bus going away. And I went, you are nuts. I said, I think you'll have a riot in the theatre if you end the film there. And the studio also agreed with not that they were in agreement, I didn't know it, but they were in agreement with my side of the story. It was just the producer and the director, because they had collaborated so much on the screenplay, for years that
they were too close to it.
They were. Unfortunately, we never previewed it like that. We never previewed it without the ending. So never got to see whether the audience would revolt, but having seen the way the audience reacted to it during the screening, they would have revolted because they were so into it. It was very rare to have a preview, a test screening where the audience are vocal about what's going on. You know, like they're so with the characters that they're like they're sitting in their living room, you know, watching it. You know, they were just not holding back.